Got it.
Hi, it's Steve. I am here with Paul Lund. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Steve. Good to
Thanks
see
for
you.
joining us.
My pleasure. It's my luxury as a teacher with the summer off.
So you have a little bit of time to give us, and I appreciate that. Let me start this way. I am calling you a freedom fighter. Do you identify with yourself as a freedom fighter?
I think it's anyone who appreciates all the freedom we've enjoyed growing up in America and take for granted in America and see how quickly those freedoms are being eroded or you know dissolved by big government. Um, I can see why I could be called a freedom fighter in this day and age. We can't take them for granted, and we know if we don't link up and join enough people together, these pockets of sanity, these pockets of resistance, we're going to be in an authoritarian state. And where do we go from there?
That would be ugly. Um, have you always been somebody who appreciated the freedom, or is this really new to your life?
You know what? I think even though I'm a 60-year-old, I think I still have that rebellious teenager or early 20s person who, wanted freedom and emancipation from my parents before I wanted it from my government. Of course, you get older and wiser and you realize the parents had your best interest at heart. Whereas, now the government does not have our best interest at heart. And there's the rub. But I still have that rebellion and that questioning authority in me from back then.
Has it been accentuated recently, or have you been on an even keel in terms of questioning authority?
Now, I'd say it's been accelerating. I think a lot of people are going to point to how the COVID response was handled, but we've seen encroachment on religious freedom, the whole political correctness movement. We've seen signs of creeping Marxism, but they've certainly accelerated now. And so stepping up um, and having even greater urgency to bring other people into the fray, into the good fight, that's become a high priority in my life.
Well, what exactly was it about COVID that led you to take a
Mhm.
stand?
A few things, Steve. If you look even um, going back to the summer of love, some called it, but the George Floyd aftermath, the 574 some odd mostly peaceful riots, um, I saw the outward shameless manipulation. I remember a CNN reporter reporting on a mostly peaceful protest with flames, hellfire in the backdrop. And it was dystopian. It was so big brotherish, trying to say one thing glaringly, the big lie. And then I remember our own Governor Murphy uh, and all the authority figures shaming us for going out without a mask, that we're almost like, trying to commit murder, except for when they're having a Black Lives Matter
Protest.
protest or parade or a walk. And then there's Murphy leading it with no mask. There's the exception. You know, you got hundreds of people on the streets in the inner city, but that's okay. But if I go out without a mask, I'm like a condemned criminal. So the hypocrisy, you know, was extraordinary in that time. I saw the COVID vaccine when it was a Trump FDA that fast tracked it. How all the local governors in the Northeast told people, don't trust it, don't trust it. Change of administration. Now they're trusting it all the way down to 6 month olds for emergency use only. That's experimentation on children.
Was that a bottom line for you that at this point innocent babies are being targeted?
Yeah, that and seeing how even in the government schools, I was in a a charter school at the time, and they were so taking their marching orders from the CDC, who were taking their marching orders from the teachers union. But they were so adamant about that 6 foot rule, which turned out to be completely arbitrary, that they put tape on the floor of the classroom and two desks facing each other to be 6 feet apart from chair at desk to chair at desk, the back to back. There had to be a 2 inch gap between the desks. Our center director would come in regularly to see if that gap was being maintained because we know how viruses are very ruly that way. That 2 inch gap made all the difference. The ludicrousness and then imposing it on kids and the masking of kids, seeing the blue states handle the pandemic one way and seeing the red states another, and then they don't comment about how the outcomes were no more favorable and sometimes less favorable in those blue states. Yeah, these are a bunch of last straws that really egg me on.
You mentioned that at this point in your life, this is the most pressing issue. If you were 10 years ago, could you have seen yourself doing this?
Well, Steve, 10 years ago, my way of maybe having an impact was to run locally for town council 5 times, for board of ed once, for state senate once. And I ran in the out of favor party, and I would faithfully collect 1 out of every 3 votes. And I kept doing it because they needed someone to put their name on the ballot. And knowing the chances were slim, but hope springs eternal. I always had this hope that maybe the next one, that pendulum would swing and that machine politics, there'd be a monkey wrench thrown in it, namely me, that we'd get in there and start to change politics on a local level. After several attempts, about a year and a half ago, I'm on a Zoom call with my friend Rima Jakubowicz, and we're waiting for the campaigns for other candidates to warm up so we can get involved, perhaps. I was done running personally, but if I could help maybe another candidate, I'd be willing to do that. But I was introduced to that time to a lady who was a guest on the call, Dr. Alana Fishbein of No Left Turn in Education. And she shared her experience in her school district with her children. And I was looking for something, Steve, that I could do other than run, and something that didn't just run from one campaign election cycle to another, where I'd go out, hoping and knocking on doors, creating literature, showing up to town council meetings, talking about the same 3 issues: taxes, overdevelopment, one-party rule, and not getting anywhere. I said, what can I do that's sustainable, that I can stay with? And this became, coming from a teaching background now for 14 years, and her pushing back on the indoctrination in the schools, and I saw them firsthand. That became my cause.
So specifically, your target is the indoctrination in the schools.
Yes, the twofold. Actually, it's manifold. It's been going on for decades. If you look at climate change, that's one piece of it. But if you look more recently, the sex and race seem to be more important than the 3 R's that we grew up believing were important.
So, what's your goal?
Well, the goal and the mission of the organization should be my own goal, and that is to educate and empower parents, grandparents, concerned citizens to ideally break up this monopoly of government schools, to have a free market of schools, to have alternatives, to cultivate alternatives, but in the short term, to expose the fact that what they claim to be protecting the children what they claim to be educating the children is really harming the children on two fronts, and that is on the gender ideology and on the anti-racist ideology.
So when you want to raise awareness of these twin modes of propaganda, are you saying the end result should be that people abandon the public school system and form alternatives like homeschooling?
I'm saying that that is a possibility. The schools are being exposed. If you look at the academics, I'll use the phrase that's been around for a long time. They've dumbed down the curriculum. They've lowered expectations of the academics and of behavior. And their product for all the tax money they receive is poor. If you look at their outcomes, even with cheating, even with helping kids through the system, 35% proficiency in reading is not cutting it. And so I think a time like this, when parents, because of COVID lockdown and because of remote classroom learning, parents got a glimpse into what was happening in the classrooms. And I think that's opening the door. We're a little ways off to parents embracing the idea that they can find a way to educate their kids without the public school. I mean, that's quite a new concept to a lot of people, that we can actually function without a Department of Education overseeing everything and top-down approach to schooling. But I'd say in the short term, it's getting more parents to show up to school board meetings, getting more citizens to run for local office. I was the exception running for office over and over again. They couldn't find new blood. We got to find new blood. We got to empower and educate on what they can do as candidates, what they can do as concerned parents at school board meetings, what they can do writing to their legislators. Getting, again, Steve, not getting so caught up in just paying the bills in their day-to-day and burying their heads, but getting actively engaged and aware of what's going on, what's being stripped from them, what's being stripped of their kids.
Is that sufficient? Do you feel that the key to recruiting more people to join the ranks is just making them aware of the damage that's being done to their children? Will that get most of the people off their couch?
If it was enough, we'd have a lot more people by now. I would say, Steve, we have to see parents who are directly impacted. If their child has an adverse impact, if their child is coming home with anxiety, coming home with behavioral issues, coming home with questions that belie a kind of a manipulation and an indoctrination that's going on. That's unsettling to the kids, it will become more unsettling to the parents. In other words, sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better. There has to be direct impact. I was at a Board of Ed meeting where a parent was at the Board of Ed with the daughter who came out with a pro-life stance at a rally for sex education to espouse, Planned Parenthood's version of sex ed, which is, well, you always have abortion, as an easy out. And this one girl was actively bullied with a principal present, and nothing was done to intervene. He was almost proud of his grievance warriors, his social justice warriors, for taking on this young lady. Now that parent he's a reluctant dissident now. He's getting more engaged because it hit home. There's a lady, Angela Redding, who made national news because her concern, the daughter in elementary school was making enlisted to make a poster on polysexuality. And when she expressed her concern on Facebook in a very gracious post, not to send out hate over the sexuality, but concern that that's too young an age to engage in that conversation, A local, I believe, major on Fort Dix um, found her to be such a threat that he informed the local authorities and the federal authorities as if she was a domestic terrorist. She's now engaged in a lawsuit over that. She is a reluctant dissident. If she had her way, she'd still be on the board of ed. She'd still, be clerking at a law firm that would not have turned their back on her for employment because now she's engaged in defending herself against the government that sees parents as a threat.
Yeah, the world is upside down. The inmates often seem like they're running the asylum.
Yeah,
Um, I could see, with the reluctant dissidents, um, getting motivated to take a stand in the early rounds, entering the ring.
right.
But what's going to sustain them for a 15-round fight? I mean, these problems are not going to go away overnight. And
Mhm.
I've often said, you can take all the Faucis and all the Bidens and all the Soroses and all the WEF and all the ringleaders of this whole thing, and do what you're going to do with them according to the law, but you're
Mhm.
still going to have all the rank and file Kool-Aid drinkers who have bought into it already.
Mhm.
So it's going to be a long haul. What will sustain the reluctant dissidents for a 15-round fight? Like, what sustains you, that you can be confident you'll go the full 15 rounds?
I could speak to me personally. I'm stubborn. Uh, my wife will confirm. I am a pig-headed person. When I am challenged or when I get resistance, I keep pushing and pushing and pushing. But if you know you're right about something, and you know that um, you only live once, as my kids in school say, and someone who's willing to give up their freedom for security, it said, will have neither in the long run. So I realized that the idea, Steve, that at this point in my life, retreat is not an option. Um, I lock arms with people that are fighting the good fight. Um, I contribute my knowledge and my insights to these people, and I draw inspiration from them. I mean, your whole premise of this website is so that people can draw inspiration from each other. And I feel like there's pockets of, again, sanity and pockets of people who are questioning their sanity who need to hear from us so that they know that they're not, the world seems to be going crazy, but there's a good part of the world that is still have their collective minds and their souls intact. And we just want to we want to connect them. And I think education is powerful. There's a lot of people who are zealous, but not according to knowledge. And there's a lot of people who are knowledgeable, but they don't necessarily have the zeal. So they may not attract a lot of people, but their knowledge needs to get out there. There's always three kinds of people in an organization I've read. You've got the mavens who know everything about everything. You got the salespeople who can market it and reach people on an emotional level with it and lead them into action. And then you got the connectors, who know a lot of people who know a lot of people. All three of these are essential. If we could just find people to do data entry sometimes, the volunteer work, there's so many different opportunities in an organization to contribute. It doesn't all have to be the face of it. It don't all have to be in front of a mic. Certainly a lot of people, more comfortable behind the scenes. So just continue to grow the organization. It's belief in a higher power, you know, that there's something transcendent in this kind of work, that true joy and satisfaction comes from serving a cause that's greater than self. And we know that a lot of people will grow weary and a lot of people will drop out. But when I was in sales, Steve, we learned, and you're in insurance, it's a numbers game. The growing an army of people is a numbers game, and we can't pick our winners. We don't know who they're going to be. We got to go wide and deep. When I was in network marketing, I said go wide, get a lot of people direct to you, and work through those people to get people under them. It's a wonder, and I know God's had his hand in my life, because when I failed for 20 years to build a network marketing business, but I learned all the ins and outs of it. I think I failed because the bottom line was I'm just earning a living. I was just looking to make a buck at that. Here, it's not about making a buck. It's about doing what's right, standing up for the truth, the whole truth. Yeah.
Do you feel that God has called you for this mission?
Yeah, Steve, I believe that if God's hand is not in it and I'm not listening for his leading, it could be just a form of um, self gratification, a form of what's the word? The A word I'm looking for when you're looking to have the approval of others, or about
Affirmation,
validation, and
validation.
exercise in self-validation, maybe to compensate for all the things I didn't accomplish. I didn't build my network marketing pyramid. I didn't succeed in gaining public office. I didn't become all I wanted to become. I didn't become a parent. I didn't do a lot of things that I could have regretted in life, but I'm too old and wise and mature about that. When you look at God, you get philosophical and say everything, good, bad, success, and failure, led me to this point and gave me instruction and gave me knowledge and understanding and compassion for others that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So yes, I believe I've been, to borrow a word that's triggering in some circles, I've been groomed for a time such as this through all my experiences because of a gracious God.
Does God help you on a daily basis?
He does, because I recognize his hand on a daily basis. When I almost fell asleep on the road today and I saw how close I came to running off, I recognized and I realized God has done and had his hand in. I traveled 150 miles round trip for the last 5 years of my teaching job. And there are times when I'm drained at the end of the day. So the fact that I haven't run into a ditch or into a tree, God forbid, means that God's keeping me around for something. Now, is this the whole of his cause? No, I believe that there's always something beyond what I can possibly imagine at hand here, but I believe that his hand is in this. Why did I go into education? Why have I been privy to kind of be in the belly of the beast and see firsthand what's going on, so I can share my insights as a conservative Christian educator and freedom lover? And what I want to do, Steve, I want to preach beyond the choir. I don't want to be in an echo chamber. I don't require that. What I need to do is find a way to bridge, to connect with people on a human level, and to get below the surface a little bit of the talking points. I want to get below the level and deeper than the talking points, and just appeal to people's common sense if they have it, and common decency. And I think more and more people have it. It just needs to be tapped in a way. And I think we have to present our case in a way that draws people in rather than triggers and pushes them away. I think there are forces of division out there that love us to be, carved up, black and white, male and female, and everything in between. The class warfare, the identity politics. There are people manipulating we the people. And I believe there's a much larger chunk of folks out there who can come into the fold, so to speak, and see who the true enemy of freedom is. It's not each other.
Let's suppose that right now we were in an auditorium of 300 people who have the basic decency in the sense that you're talking about, and somebody stands up and says, I get it. I see the problem. I am aware of the harm that's being done. I realize that my services are needed for the cause in some way, but I'm really scared. I don't want to get canceled. I don't want to have fights with my relatives. I know what they do to people. I don't want to get bullied. I still want to do it, but I'm afraid. What would you say to encourage that person to take the step and get in the pool?
Steve, that's a tough one. In education, they talk about customizing it, individualized education based on the student's needs. I'd want to get to know that person on a deeper level, reinforce what they've learned, not put any pressure on them to go out right away and become an activist, but at least build on what we started there. Keep the line of communication open, follow up, follow up, follow up, and cultivate a relationship. The old saying, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. Listen, you say it, truly, it is a long term. It might be the rest of my life. And so we got to be patient about that and patient with people. Now, when I talk about bridging the gap, I have a perfect example in mind. I was outside of our municipal building waiting for a town council meeting, and two groups had started to show up. One was Black Lives Matter chapter was showing up to our town council, many of them from out of town. I heard a lot of them were recruited on Craigslist and were paid money to show up and agitate. And on the other side, you had people from the Proud Boys. So, but there were two folks arguing, one saying Black Lives Matter, and the other one saying, no, 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 all lives matter. No, Black Lives, well, they were actually arguing over that. I wanted to say, I wish I had a t-shirt that said, of course they do. So without saying a word, I could just step in between them. I agree. Black Lives Matter and all lives matter. And Steve, not to diminish this, I believe the Black Lives Matter is saying that, yes, there's a disproportionate number of death, poverty, crime among Black lives. And so, even though in theory, in this country, all lives matter, they're saying that Black lives somehow seem to matter less if you look at certain statistics. And they have certain elements to blame over that. Now, we can agree that there's different outcomes among, if you want to look at statistics, but we should have a dialogue about what the root causes of those differences in poverty and crime and drug use and single parenting. What are the underlying causes? Is it really racism? Is it really one group holding the other group down? So it's a conversation that needs to have nuance. And then the all lives matter. Who's going to argue that point? But why are you arguing over that? Find the common ground. Lives matter, whatever the color. I want to open dialogue. Like I said, I want to preach beyond the choir.
Let's wrap it up this way. It is a lifetime pursuit because this is going to be a multi-generational repair job.
Right.
So tell me your legacy. Tell me, how do you want the next generation and the generation of that to remember you?
It's funny when I did my first cover letter to become a teacher, I spoke to a concept called generativity. Generativity is exactly speaking to that. Why do I want to be a teacher? Because I want that my life experience and the wisdom that I've accumulated to be passed on to the next generation, right? And I don't, when I'm gone, Steve. I'm in a whole nother realm. I'm not overly concerned necessarily, with any monument to the fact that I've been here. I want to know in my own heart and have it verified by the Spirit that I did His will, and I want to hear, you know, thou good and trusted servant, well done at the end when I'm off this earthly coil. And if that comes from Him, then I know, everything will be in order as it should have been on earth. So really it's the higher call that I have to stay true to, and not those aspects of my own ego that would be satisfied to hear. But having said that, listen, on this planet, on this earth, I still have an ego. When a student tells me, Mr. Lund, you are one of the best teachers. You know, I actually learned something with you. I learned math and I could never learn before. When I hear things like that, it's gratifying. So in the same vein, if people are sharing with me that I was able to inspire them to find their voice and to be heard and to have their validation while they're here. That's what would be edifying to me. I'm still looking to find my voice, but if I help others do the same, that's really what's going to make it worthwhile.
Well, Paul Lund, you have graciously shared your voice with us today, and I find it moving. And I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't have any inside connection with the big guy, but it seems to me you're pretty much on that track that he's going to welcome you with open arms and pat you on the back and say, "Job well done, thank you." So I thank you for your efforts, and I thank you for the inspiration you give us all.
Thank you, Steve. It was a real pleasure working with you. I hope to continue to keep the conversation going.
Me too. Thank you.